Hey y'all, it is your favorite nerdy girl here, Nerdygirlreviews, and we are back with another recap for Lovestory, the John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette love story in the Ryan Murphy universe television. I think this is episode 6, the famous wedding. I believe post that big Battery Park fight, she finally is okay with doing the whole nuptial thing. She's even wearing the ring now, which was always very minimal. She didn't like gaudy jewelry and whatnot to take away attention or bring attention to herself. We start the episode with them planning how they're going to go about it and how minimalist, because she loves minimalists. She loves to stay as simple and clean as possible. So there are moments of that, and she's loving that it's not going to be a big, poofy, unexpected wedding. Somehow, in their brainstorming, they come across the island that his first girlfriend introduced him to, which, again, you don't do. But nonetheless, I think I mentioned in my other review that it was such an impossible island to get to in Georgia. It's Cumberland Island, and there's a Baptist church that they selected for their nuptials there in 1986. I think the place is landmarked because it's the first African Baptist church to exist. Why would you pick this? I know that his father had been like civil rights activist and was part of that time that was very historical and purposeful for the United States, and so was his uncle. But is it me? Am I the only one to think that maybe you kind of desecrated and just bamboozling this space? I don't necessarily know that if they had services there, because it would seem near impossible. The fact that the location has no electricity, the windows were painted. It was very stuffy and stifling in there. It's the South, so the temperatures are going to be overwhelming. Why would you pick this? And I believe they got I believe they had a priest, but they also had a minister of the local area to sing, certain religious songs like Amazing Grace as the bride was coming down the aisle. Again, I'm not saying you can't do it, but I don't know. It almost treaded upon inappropriate. Certain things I will say, maybe that's just me, maybe I'm superstitious. Certain things I believe are sacred and should not be touched from such a prominent, wealthy family. Did you contribute before? Did you know about that church? I mean, obviously his girlfriend, but have you contributed funds? You know what I mean? Like, it's problematic, for today's generation and the way that we scrutinize things today. I think it's a twinge problematic. But anyway, let's stay away from that. She also mentions to Calvin that maybe it's not best to continue to work at Calvin Klein because it was a bit of a distraction. The paparazzi were hounding her already. She was starting to feel very claustrophobic, and she wasn't going to be able to do her job as how she always intended to do the job, as I believe she was a buyer for Calvin, I believe. Side note, these are things that I think I've mentioned in my other reviews too. That the fortunate life that this individual experienced in New York City. Because, again, I don't know too much. I'm assuming, I'm making assumptions. But these fashion designers have always been notoriously racist. And the fact that she literally came from zero to no background, for her to all of a sudden be working for one of these major designers and moving, there was transactions of money, and people who perhaps were already New Yorkers but just didn't quote unquote fit the bill, didn't look traditionally what Calvin would be looking for, they wouldn't be even eligible for these jobs. You can have all the education in the world, but if you don't look a certain way, they weren't going to even look at you. There's a little bit of controversy online that developed during COVID with Marc Jacobs and some really long, annoying nails. Look, I get it. Anybody can wear what they want, but he has made a name for himself. He's always made a name for himself as a designer, but now in recent, I feel like he's drawn in a new crowd because of these ridiculously long gel-like nails that are not practical whatsoever, but they're gorgeous. And historically, they were made. It's funny how we criticize and see things that are quote unquote feminine. And I'm not criticizing a man wearing these long nails. You could do what you want. But the fact that there was a certain look, if you were going to work in corporate America like that, it wasn't professional to look like that. It wasn't professional to have long nails. It wasn't professional to have hoop earrings. It wasn't professional to look a certain way. And now you're making it cool when like 30 years ago, it wasn't the case. And the same could be said about Caroline Bessette. Like, because she fit a certain aesthetic, all these doors open for her. I mean, for heaven's sake, who can say that anyone else has mimicked her life? Unfortunately, it was cut too soon, but she would have a love affair with a beautiful, gorgeous actor and help his career. Supposedly, she put Kate Moss on the map. She marries the most gorgeous bachelor of New York City at the time, like John F. Kennedy Jr. And all she had was an education background. Anyway, I'll leave that for you as homework to just mull over. And now let's add their presence at that church that I don't necessarily think was appropriate. Anyway, so, we see the whole proceedings. I forgot to mention, too, as part of the cast in my previous reviews, that the designer who makes her wedding dress famous, is that famous, beautiful slip dress, was created by Narciso Rodriguez. I think a lot of people have had issues pronouncing his name. Narciso Rodriguez. And he was working as a fellow designer with Calvin, played by Tonatio. He was part of the cast for Kiss of the Spider Woman, which I reviewed on my feed. You can take a gander, or on YouTube. And he was also part of the cast of Vida that was on Stars. I also reviewed that show. If you want to check it out, it's on YouTube. But he's an incredible actor, and I think he's doing a great job as the designer here. And he's the one that makes this dress. The dress was impossible to kind of get over her head because it had no zipper, so he had to work his magic. Somehow he does. But because they had no wedding planner, no coordinator, nothing was running as like you would assume. That's why those things are important. But in doing that, they also eliminated the presence of the paparazzi because nobody leaked any information. So smart or no, it was a little bit of a mess, a little bit of a cluster mess, but they got it done. So they finally get married. 2-3 hours late. People are like dying from heat strokes practically. But, from the wedding, and I believe the wedding is online on YouTube, you can see them, saying their vows to each other in a candlelight ceremony, which, again, it wasn't necessarily intended, but because it's a church, they just assume that they could use candles. Again, how do you know? How do you know that sacred space and those particular tools were for you? You know what I mean? That's why I said certain things you should not touch. So here they go, and they take the candles to perform the ceremony. It's very beautiful. She was walked down the aisle by her stepfather, I believe, and, she looks stunning. And the famous picture